Chapter 1 Lilith, Winter 2034. Somewhere in the Idaho Panhandle. The familiar aroma of iron and sulfur filled Lilith's olfactory senses. Leaning against a large pine, she closed her single eye and meditated, inhaling deeply through her nose until her lungs were full, then carefully exhaling through her mouth. Grounding her body and steadying her mind, she took in the smells and sounds around her, centering her soul after the high of combat. Iron and sulfur. Freshly spilt blood, the lingering odor of ordnance and small arms fire. Holding on to the stench, she processed it further. Dead men, dozens of them, all around me. Dropped mortars on them before we charged. That checked out. Then came the auditory stimuli. Heavily armored footfalls and the last moans of grievously wounded soldiers. She homed in on the sources. The Vanguard unit is mopping up. A lot of the fuckers are still writhing. If she concentrated hard enough, she could hear a couple of desperate prayers being cut short by the wet squelches of axes crushing chests or separating heads from torsos. It was routine for the Leviathan Brigade. It didn't take much to incapacitate the human body, but a surprising amount of kinetic damage had to be done to kill it. And Leviathan didn't take prisoners. Are we war criminals? It wasn't the first time the thought had crossed her mind in the last few years. She asked herself the same question every time, every mop-up, every psyop. Is it a war crime if it's done to war criminals? Is this even war? The stench of hydraulic fluid and thuds of armored boots cut that thought short. You'd think with all of that faith they'd have fought harder. The voice was rich, with a tinge of sincerity. Lilith opened her eye for the first time in a few minutes. Her comrade stood a few paces back, inspecting the fallen platoon's commander with the same curiosity a child would with a dead animal. His armored form shied away when their eyes met. Sorry, are you doing your thing? For such an imposing man, Ironsides was also a meek one. Lilith liked that about him. No, I was about done anyway, she let out with a sigh. What's the body count? Ironside stood to his full height. He was a head taller than Lilith ordinarily, 2 more heads while he was in his combat kit, improvised hydraulic-powered armor. Analyzing him as he spoke, she gauged that he was bloodied but unharmed. A mix of sweat and gore dotted his pale face. None of ours got murked. A couple of light wounds, and some of the armor's gonna need maintenance ASAP. He stood awkwardly when he finished, anxiously picking at the mud and ichor that covered an assault rifle he'd looted. Smiling as a proud mother would to a child, Lilith stretched her shoulders out before grasping the spear that was leaning against the same tree she had been meditating against. It was still slick with the blood of the Dominion's platoon commander that was sprawled at her feet. She had surmised he was likely the strongest-willed amongst today's enemy. It had made him a high-value target. She wiped the spear's tip against the dead man's pant leg. And what about them? Ironsides was preoccupied with the rifle, racking the charging handle repeatedly, clearing debris with each charge. Lilith had to speak up and snap her fingers to get his attention. Sides, hey, man, I still need the report. The big man quickly put the weapon down. Sorry, he chuckled. That kid that pissed himself made it out, but he's the only one. He paused for a moment, biting his lip. Lilith knew when he had something to say. It was usually best to wait until he was comfortable rather than press, so they stood in silence until he spoke again. Lilith, was this overkill? They had like 60 guys, maybe 70 tops. Her instinct was to reprimand him, to remind him what kind of people they were fighting, that overkill was the least their enemy deserved, and maximum aggression was their own unit's mission. She could feel her temper welling up within her body. She pinched her brow between her gloved index finger and thumb, lowering herself into a crouch and taking 2 purposeful breaths before responding to her comrade. I think it's ugly, yeah, she spoke calmly, nodding her head towards the devastated bodies that the Vanguard troops had begun piling up. These guys seem pretty green, probably only just mustered and barely trained before being sent out here. Gazing lazily around, Lilith noted a mixture of Leviathan's armored vanguard and scouts setting up a secured perimeter. She let herself relax and dropped from a crouch to a sprawl. Ironsides joined her in the dirt, gently easing the frame of his armor next to her. The buzzing power bank fixed to his back slowed, and a hiss of air unlocked the hard points of the makeshift war machine. Carefully, he worked his limbs out of the battered shell. The long-sleeved shirt and combat pants he wore under the armor drenched in sweat. The warrior spoke while stretching his heavily muscled limbs. "I'm sorry if it was a bad question, Lil. They were fundies and all, but they just shit their pants so fast, man." Lilith gave the bearded giant a tired smile and a small sigh, fishing out a joint from the fanny pack under her body armor. "Besides, there aren't bad questions, dude." She brought the hand-rolled spliff to her lips, lighting it with the near-empty Zippo before handing it to her comrade. "You ask good questions, hard questions. It's why the Vanguard elected you to be their captain." Ironsides took a long, grateful drag before handing it back, a handful of coughs preceding his words. "Well, comrade captain, what are your thoughts? This group folded easy, even for us." Lilith pondered the question, dragging on the spliff and keeping the contents within her lungs as long as she could before shamelessly coughing and sputtering herself, the smoke making her mouth dry and voice a bit deeper. "Well, either the command that sent them here was riding high on a victory and thought they could take us, or..." She paused to spit, sending a wad of saliva and phlegm onto the fundy leader still laying dead near the two. "Or?" Ironsides pressed inquisitively. Lilith removed a half-full Nalgene bottle from her plate carrier and gulped down the water before responding. "Or they think we're still holed up in Cascadia and sent these guys out here expecting a community militia. Either way, I think the commune around Wallace got fucked." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Around them, the scouts and Vanguard who weren't on perimeter security were in their own post-combat routines. Some looted what they could off the dead, others formed small groups sharing what libations they had amongst each other while conversating, and a few sat as their captains did, processing the day's combat. Ironsides broke the silence first, a single drained word leaving his lips. "Fuck." Lilith reciprocated the exhausted frustration. "Yeah, man, fuck." Her brother in arms had his face in his palms, stretching his skin downwards as his voice rose. "They beat us here by what, a day? We were on our fucking way back." His body jolted up as he furiously looked for some way to release his anger. Grabbing a ruined helmet from the forest floor, he sent it careening amongst the pine trees. Lilith tried to calm him down. "Sides, you're spiraling. Be cool." There were tears streaming down his face as he repeatedly stomped the dead commander's face into the dirt, caving the corpse's cranium in under his boot in sickening squelches. "You Christo-fascist motherfucker!" The rest of Leviathan's combat unit had noticed Ironsides losing it. Not a single warrior intervening as Lilith dashed straight towards the Vanguard captain. Grabbing him by his shirt, she pulled him close and embraced him. She didn't speak, she didn't lecture, and instead simply held her friend as he sobbed in her arms. Around them, their comrades turned their backs, giving the two the privacy to settle what they needed to settle. Ironside's face was a mess of tears, sweat, and mucus, stammering as he spoke. "I'm sorry, Lil." Cooing the huge man, she ran a hand over his bare head softly. He stuttered in between heaves. "We were just there. We were on our fucking way back, man." Ironside's frustration was palpable and contagious. The warriors surrounding them were still coming down from the ambush, but the agitation was growing. Lilith summoned as much calm in her voice as possible. "I know, buddy. I know. We're gonna get him, but we need to regroup first, okay?" Hello, everybody. It's Monty. I may be partaking in too many libations while recording this, but thank you so much for your support and your patience. I know it's been sporadic. If you're on the Discord, you kind of know that my life's been pretty busy, but if you're just a rando, then hey, thanks for being here. I'm not going to judge you for, coming here out of nowhere. More to come. I just am taking as much time as I need to with the writing, so it comes out in a way that I want it to be. And then, I don't know, man. Thanks for being here. I'll post more soon. Fuck, I almost forgot. There is a YouTube channel, which if you just Google Letters from 2035 on YouTube, it's just me splicing together some of the old TikTok clips onto YouTube so that you can just watch them in full, because they're also, before I knew what I was doing, they're all separated on the podcast as well. So if you kind of want to see the earlier shit, like UN Interventions, the one I just posted, you can see them all, or you'll slowly start seeing them all pop up on the YouTube. Again, that's Letters from 2035 on YouTube. Okay, thanks. Bye for real.
Please stop what you're doing. Stop adjusting this student feed. Please stop adjusting this student feed. Please stop what you're doing.